Have you ever felt like you desperately need someone's approval to feel complete? Have you ever been so afraid of being alone that you'd accept crumbs of affection? Or maybe you've caught yourself changing who you are just to avoid rejection. If you answered yes to any of these questions, you're not alone. And more importantly, you're not sick. You're trapped in a pattern that millions of people live without even realizing it. Emotional dependency. The problem is that society romanticizes this. We call it true love, when someone can't live without another person. We celebrate passion when two people lose themselves in each other. But the truth nobody wants to hear is this. Emotional dependency isn't love. It's a prison. And today, using the profound wisdom of Carl Jung, you're going to understand not just what this prison is, but how to unlock the door and walk free. Because emotional freedom isn't a luxury. It's a birthright. And it's closer than you think. Stay until the end, because what you're about to discover could completely change how you relate. Not just to others, but most importantly to yourself. And folks, I want to open my heart to you. I've been putting so much of my time, energy, and heart into every video on this channel. But lately, many people have been telling me they're not receiving notifications about new videos anymore. And honestly, that gets to me. Because I know there are people going through tough times, and these words could reach them at just the right moment. If this channel has ever touched you in some way, can I ask for your help? I need you to hit that notification bell and choose the all option. This greatly increases the chance you'll receive future videos. Write something in the comments, anything really. This helps the video reach more people. And if you can, share it with someone who needs it. This encourages me to keep going. And more than that, it helps this message reach those who need it most. Now let's get back to the video. First and foremost, we need to be clear. Emotional dependency isn't loving too much. It's loving too little, especially yourself. Emotional dependency is a state where your self-worth, your mood, and even your sense of identity depend completely on another person. It's like being an emotional satellite, orbiting eternally around someone who has become your sun. And when that sun threatens to move away, you panic. Carl Jung identified this pattern as a manifestation of what he called non-individuated relationships. For him, when two people haven't completed the process of becoming whole individually, they create bonds based on neediness, not love. It's like trying to build a bridge connecting two foundations that aren't solid yet. But how does this manifest in daily life? The emotionally dependent person lives in constant alertness. They analyze every word, every gesture, every silence from the other person. A slightly dry good morning can ruin their entire day. A delay in responding to a message becomes mental torture. And when there's any sign of distancing, it feels like the world is collapsing. This isn't a conscious choice. Nobody wakes up and decides, today I'm going to be emotionally dependent. It's a pattern that forms silently, often from childhood, creating roots so deep that the person ends up believing this is love. But there's a fundamental difference between love and dependency that Jung helps us see. True love celebrates the other person's autonomy. Dependency fears it. Love trusts. Dependency controls. Love expands. Dependency contracts. When you truly love, you want the best for the person, even if that doesn't include you. When you're dependent, you want the person, regardless of what's best for them, or for you. And here's the cruel paradox. The more you cling, the more the person pulls away. The more you try to control, the more they seek freedom. It's like trying to hold water in your hands. The more pressure you apply, the more it escapes. Emotional dependency turns relationships into silent battlefields. On one side, the dependent person, living in constant fear of abandonment. On the other, the person feeling suffocated, seeking to breathe. And in the middle, what should be love becomes negotiation, emotional blackmail, and manipulation disguised as care. The saddest part is that the dependent person genuinely believes they're loving. They confuse intensity with depth, possessiveness with passion, fear with care. And so they build relationships that are golden cages, beautiful on the outside, suffocating on the inside. Have you lived in or are you currently in a relationship like this? Leave a comment so we can create a network of mutual support. Your experience could help someone going through the same awakening process. To understand how to break free from emotional dependency, we first need to understand how it forms. And here enters one of the most revolutionary contributions of depth psychology, the understanding that many of our adult patterns are echoes of unresolved childhood wounds. Carl Jung observed that children form their first notion of love through their relationship with primary caregivers. If this relationship is healthy, offering security, validation, and gradual autonomy, the child develops what we call secure attachment. They learn it's possible to love and be loved without losing themselves in the process. But when this primary relationship is marked by inconsistency, rejection, overprotection, or emotional abandonment, the child develops survival strategies that, years later, become problematic relationship patterns. For example, a child who only received attention when sick might learn that vulnerability is the currency for love. Years later, they become an adult who unconsciously puts themselves in victim positions to receive care. Or a child who grew up in a home where love was conditional. "I only love you if you're good," might develop a deep belief that they need to be perfect to deserve affection. As an adult, they exhaust themselves trying to please everyone, especially their partner. Jung realized that these primary wounds create what he called complexes, clusters of emotionally charged memories that operate autonomously in our psyche. It's like having little internal selves, each with their own agenda and automatic reactions. We already have 2 deep videos on this channel about healing the mother wound and the father wound that have helped many of our subscribers identify and overcome these patterns that have been with them since childhood. I'll leave them in the description, and as soon as you finish this video, I highly recommend you watch them. In the case of emotional dependency, we frequently find complexes related to abandonment, rejection, and inadequacy. These complexes are activated every time something in the present resonates with past wounds, causing the person to react not to the current situation, but to the old trauma. That's why someone might panic when their partner arrives 10 minutes late. It's not really about the delay. It's about the abandonment complex being triggered, bringing back that helpless feeling of the child waiting for a parent who never came. The family environment also plays a crucial role. Families where boundaries are blurred, where there's no space for individuality, where love is expressed through emotional fusion, tend to produce adults who don't know where they end and the other begins. Jung identified this as a failure in the individuation process, the natural path of becoming a unique and autonomous individual. When this process is interrupted or distorted in childhood, the person carries into adult life a sense of incompleteness that they try to fill through relationships. But here's the good news. Understanding the roots isn't about blaming anyone. It's about breaking free. When you understand that your dependency patterns aren't character flaws, but intelligent adaptations your psyche created to survive, you can begin to treat them with compassion instead of judgment. And it's from this compassionate understanding that true transformation becomes possible. Emotional dependency is one of the most common psychological conditions, and paradoxically, one of the least recognized. That's because it disguises itself as virtues, care, dedication, unconditional love. But when we look closer, the signs are all there. The first sign is the constant need for validation. The dependent person lives searching for confirmations that they're loved, accepted, valued. It's not enough for their partner to show love. They need them to demonstrate it every day in specific ways, to believe it's true. It's like a phone that loses battery quickly and needs constant charging. Another striking sign is difficulty making decisions alone. From simple choices like what to wear to important decisions about career, the dependent person always seeks the other's opinion and approval. They've lost, or never developed, confidence in their own judgment. Constant monitoring is another revealing pattern. Checking their partner's phone, analyzing their social media, questioning every outing, every conversation, every moment they weren't together. This doesn't necessarily happen due to sexual jealousy, but from an agonizing need to control the uncontrollable, the other person's feelings. Jung observed that fear of abandonment is perhaps the most devastating symptom. The dependent person lives under the constant shadow of being left behind. This fear is so intense that they frequently accept situations they know are harmful, just to avoid the risk of being alone. There's also the pattern of excessive self-sacrifice. The dependent person is always willing to give up their own desires, needs, and even values to maintain the relationship. They confuse love with self-annihilation, believing that the more they sacrifice, the more they prove their love. Emotional fusion is another subtle but powerful sign. The person can't clearly distinguish where their feelings end and their partner's begin. If he's sad, she becomes depressed. If he's irritated, she feels guilty. It's as if they were one person sharing the same emotional system, Possessive jealousy also makes its presence known, but it's not just about romantic jealousy. It's jealousy of anything that steals their partner's attention. Friends, family, work, hobbies. The dependent person wants to be the sole and absolute center of the other's life. There's also excessive tolerance for inappropriate behavior. The dependent person frequently accepts disrespect, emotional neglect, and even abuse, justifying and rationalizing these behaviors to avoid confronting the possibility of the relationship ending. The pattern of consecutive relationships is also revealing. The dependent person rarely stays alone. When one relationship ends, they quickly get involved in another, using the new partner as an emotional band-aid to heal the wounds from the previous one. Separation anxiety manifests even in normal temporary separations. A work trip by their partner, a night out with friends, even a few hours without contact, can generate anxiety levels disproportionate to the event. Finally, there's the loss of individual identity. The dependent person gradually abandons their own interests, friends, and goals, shaping their life completely around the relationship. They stop being an individual person and become an extension of their partner. The cruelest part is that many of these behaviors are socially accepted and even encouraged. How many times have we heard phrases like, "True love is total dedication," or "Whoever truly loves can't live without the other"? These romantic ideas disguise patterns that actually destroy both the dependent person and their relationships. Recognizing these signs isn't about judging yourself, but about breaking free. As Jung himself emphasized, what remains unconscious controls us, but what we bring to consciousness can be transformed. One of the most revolutionary contributions of Jungian psychology is the concept of the shadow, that part of ourselves we deny, repress, or simply refuse to see. In emotional dependency, the shadow carries particularly painful aspects that need to be illuminated for healing to happen. The first shadow of dependency is repressed anger. Behind the mask of a loving and dedicated person, there's often deep rage at feeling insignificant, at not being seen, at having to beg for love. But this anger is so threatening to the self-image of being a good person that it gets pushed into the unconscious. The result? The anger doesn't disappear. It manifests in indirect ways: passive-aggressive behavior, silent sabotage, emotional martyrdom. The dependent person can become a professional victim, always suffering, always sacrificed, but never taking responsibility for their own state. Another shadow is the desire for control. Although the dependent person sees themselves as someone who just loves, behind this facade exists a desperate need to control the other person. They want to control their feelings, their choices, their attention, their life. But since this desire for control contradicts the self-image of being a loving person, it's denied and projected. Jung observed that what we deny in ourselves, we tend to project onto others. Thus, the dependent person frequently accuses their partner of being controlling, when in reality they're the ones trying to control through emotional blackmail, drama, and victimization. Manipulation is another painful shadow. The dependent person rarely admits they manipulate, but develops sophisticated strategies to get what they want. Strategic crying fits, subtle threats of self-harm, constant guilt-tripping, silent treatment games, all disguised as genuine emotional expression. There's also the shadow of hidden narcissism. Although it seems contradictory, many dependent people carry covert narcissistic traits. They see themselves as special in their suffering, unique in their capacity to love, morally superior. This grandiose self-image as a love martyr is a defense against deep feelings of inadequacy. Envy is another common shadow. The dependent person might feel envious of their partner's autonomy, their ability to be self-sufficient, their independent social life. But since envy is seen as an ugly feeling, it's denied and manifests as disguised criticism or attempts to diminish the other's achievements. Jung would also identify the shadow of falseness. Behind the apparent emotional transparency, there's often a fabricated persona, a version of themselves created specifically to please their partner. The dependent person might not even know who they really are underneath all the layers of adaptation. Emotional laziness is a particularly uncomfortable shadow. It's easier to cling to someone and make them responsible for your happiness than to do the hard work of developing as an individual. Emotional dependency can be, in part, an escape from the responsibility of growing. Finally, there's the shadow of cowardice. Behind the fear of abandonment, there's often a greater fear, the fear of truly knowing oneself. It's scary to look inside and discover that maybe we're not as special, as good, or as victimized as we'd like to believe. Recognizing these shadows isn't an exercise in self-punishment. As Jung always emphasized, the shadow isn't evil. It's simply what has been left in the dark. And only when we bring light to these denied parts of ourselves can we integrate them in a healthy way. The person who accepts their anger can learn to position themselves healthily. Those who recognize their desire for control can work to develop it constructively. Those who acknowledge their manipulations can learn to communicate their needs directly. The integrated shadow becomes strength. The denied shadow becomes symptom. There's a particularly destructive dynamic that deserves special attention: the encounter between a person with emotional dependency and a narcissist. It's as if the universe conspired to create the perfect storm. Two psychological patterns that fit together like pieces of a toxic puzzle. The narcissist needs constant admiration, validation, and control. The dependent person is willing to offer exactly that in exchange for crumbs of affection. It's a system that works perfectly at first, but destroys both parties in the process. Jung understood that we attract what resonates with our unresolved complexes. The dependent person, with their deep craving for validation, is magnetically drawn to the narcissist's apparent confidence. The narcissist, with their constant need for narcissistic supply, finds the ideal source in the dependent person. The relationship usually begins with what experts call love bombing, a shower of attention, compliments, and promises that makes the dependent person feel finally seen and valued. For someone who always felt invisible, this intense attention seems like the fulfillment of all dreams. But gradually, the narcissist begins to show their true face. The attention diminishes. Compliments become scarce. Subtle devaluation emerges. Comments that undermine self-esteem, humiliating comparisons, criticism disguised as care. The dependent person, desperate to recover that initial attention, works even harder to please. This is where the vicious cycle sets in. The more the dependent person annihilates themselves to please, the more the narcissist devalues them. And the more they're devalued, the harder they try. It's like an addiction. The dependent person becomes addicted to the crumbs of approval the narcissist offers sporadically. The narcissist uses sophisticated manipulation techniques that exploit exactly the dependent person's wounds. Gaslighting makes them question their own perception of reality. Trauma bonding creates a chemical connection through cycles of abuse and reconciliation. Triangulation uses third parties to provoke jealousy and insecurity. The cruelest part is that the dependent person frequently blames themselves for the relationship's problems. They believe that if they were just better, more understanding, more attractive, their partner would go back to treating them well. This self-sabotage is exactly what feeds the toxic dynamic. Jung observed that both the narcissist and the dependent person are fleeing their own shadows through the relationship. The narcissist projects their inadequacy onto the dependent person, treating them as inferior to feel superior. The dependent person projects their strength onto the narcissist, seeing them as powerful to avoid confronting their own power. The result is devastating for both. The dependent person completely loses their identity, living in constant anxiety and despair. The narcissist, in turn, never develops the capacity for real intimacy, remaining isolated in their defensive grandiosity. Breaking free from this pattern requires the dependent person to stop trying to save or change the narcissist and start focusing on their own healing. This means accepting a painful truth. The narcissist won't change, no matter how much they sacrifice. It's also necessary to recognize that the attraction to narcissists isn't accidental. It reveals something about their own internal patterns that need healing. Often, the dependent person had narcissistic caregivers in childhood and is unconsciously reproducing these familiar patterns. Healing begins when the dependent person stops looking outside for validation and starts looking inside for themselves. When they understand that no relationship can heal their internal wounds, only they can do that. The encounter with the narcissist, however painful, can become the catalyst for awakening. It's often through this extreme pain that the dependent person finally understands they need to change, not to win the other person over, but to break free. The solution to emotional dependency isn't found in quick techniques or magic formulas. It lies in embarking on what the pioneer of analytical psychology called the individuation process, the journey of becoming who we really are, beyond the masks, fears, and adaptations we created to survive. Individuation is like a second gestation. This time, not physical, but psychological. It's the process of giving birth to yourself, of becoming the author of your own life, instead of just a character in other people's scripts. The first step of this journey is recognition. You need to admit, without judgment but with total honesty, that you have emotional dependency patterns. This doesn't mean you're weak or defective. It means you developed survival strategies that were once necessary, but now limit your capacity to live fully. Jung emphasized that what remains unconscious controls us. So, the second step is making unconscious patterns conscious. This means observing, without judging yourself, how you react in relationships. When do you feel desperate? What triggers your fear of abandonment? What behaviors do you adopt when you feel threatened? The third step is the most challenging: confronting the shadow. You need to be willing to see and accept the parts of yourself you'd rather deny. Your repressed anger, your control impulses, your subtle manipulations, your emotional laziness, not to punish yourself, but to integrate these energies constructively. The fourth stage involves what Jung called withdrawing projections. You need to stop seeing in the other person what actually belongs to you. Stop making your partner responsible for your happiness. Stop blaming them for your fears. Stop expecting them to heal your wounds. Take complete responsibility for your own emotional experience. The fifth step is developing the transcendent function, the ability to contain opposing tensions without needing to resolve them immediately. You can feel fear of abandonment and still not act desperately. You can love someone deeply and still maintain your autonomy. You can be in a relationship and still feel complete alone. Jung observed that true emotional maturity comes when we learn to be our own primary source of love, validation, and security. This doesn't mean becoming cold or distant. It means becoming so internally full that the relationship becomes a choice, not a necessity. This process isn't linear or quick. There will be relapses. There will be moments when you return to old patterns. This is normal and expected. Individuation is an ascending spiral, not a straight line. Each turn of the spiral brings a deeper level of understanding and integration. A crucial part of this process is learning to be alone with yourself, without feeling lonely. Jung saw the capacity for creative solitude as fundamental to psychological development. It's in the silence of your own company that you hear your authentic voice, discover your true desires and values. The individuation process also involves reconnecting with what Jung called the self, the ordering center of the psyche, the part of us that exists beyond the ego. It's this connection with the self that gives us the sense of purpose, direction, and completeness that doesn't depend on external factors. Gradually, as you advance in this process, your relationships begin to change. You stop relating from scarcity and start relating from abundance. You stop seeking someone to complete you and start seeking someone to share your completeness. The paradox is that the less you need the other person, the more you're capable of truly loving them. When you don't depend on them for your emotional security, you can finally see them as they really are, not as a projection of your needs. Understanding the individuation process is important, but real transformation happens in daily practice. Here are concrete strategies you can implement to start breaking free from emotional dependency today. The first practical step is creating space between yourself and your emotional impulses. When you feel that desperate urge to check your partner's phone, to confront them about something, or to seek reassurance, pause. Take 3 deep breaths. Ask yourself, what am I really feeling right now? Where is this sensation coming from? Develop what psychologists call an internal observer, a part of you that can observe your patterns without completely identifying with them. It's like having an internal camera that films your behaviors. When you catch yourself being dependent, instead of judging yourself, simply observe. Interesting. There's my dependency pattern acting up again. Establish and maintain healthy boundaries. This might mean saying no to excessive requests, maintaining your own hobbies and friendships, or simply not being available 24/7. Remember, boundaries aren't walls, they're fences with gates. They define where you end and the other person begins. Practice self-validation daily. Instead of seeking external approval, learn to give yourself the recognition you seek. Celebrate your small victories, acknowledge your efforts. Be gentle with yourself when you make mistakes. Become your own best friend. Develop a practice of intentional solitude. Regularly dedicate time to be alone without distractions. No phone, no TV, nothing that takes you away from contact with yourself. Use this time to meditate, write, reflect, or simply be present with your own thoughts and feelings. Reconnect with your own interests and passions. Frequently, dependent people abandon everything they love to focus on the relationship. Make a list of things you enjoyed before becoming dependent and start reintroducing them into your life. Develop your support network beyond the romantic relationship. Invest in genuine friendships. Maintain connections with family. Seek groups or communities that share your interests. You need multiple sources of connection and emotional support. Practice direct and honest communication. Instead of subtly manipulating to get what you want, learn to ask directly. Instead of dropping hints, be clear about your needs. This might be scary at first, but it's essential for healthy relationships. Work on your abandonment wounds directly. This might involve therapy, body work, or other healing modalities. You need to process and integrate the past experiences that created your dependency patterns. Develop tolerance for uncertainty. Emotional dependency often stems from fear of the unknown. Practice being comfortable without having all the answers, without knowing exactly how the other person feels, without having guarantees about the future. Cultivate a relationship with something greater than yourself, whether spirituality, nature, art, or anything that connects you with a sense of transcendent purpose. This reduces the pressure on your romantic relationship to be your only source of meaning. Learn to distinguish between being alone and feeling lonely. Loneliness is an emotional state that can happen even when you're with other people. Being alone is simply a physical circumstance. When you learn to appreciate your own company, the fear of abandonment loses much of its power. Practice gratitude, but not just for what you receive from the relationship. Be grateful for your own strength, for your capacity to love, for your unique qualities. Learn to see value in yourself that doesn't depend on external validation. Finally, be patient with yourself. Emotional dependency formed over years or decades. It won't disappear overnight. Every small step toward emotional autonomy is a victory worth celebrating. True emotional freedom isn't the absence of love or connection. It's the ability to love and connect from a place of fullness, not neediness. It's the difference between being with someone because you want to, and being with someone because you need to. When you complete the process of breaking free from emotional dependency, something extraordinary happens. You discover that you always had within yourself everything you were seeking in the other person. The security you sought in external approval was always available through self-acceptance. The love you begged for already existed as latent self-love. The completeness you tried to find through fusion with another was always yours by right. Jung understood that the healthiest and most lasting relationships happen between two whole individuals who choose to share their lives, not between two halves clinging to each other out of fear of disintegration. When you no longer need the other person to feel complete, you can finally love them for who they are, not for what they do for you. This journey of liberation from emotional dependency is, in reality, a journey back home, to the home that is yourself. It's the recognition that you are always complete, always worthy of love, always capable of sustaining yourself emotionally. The experiences that created dependency only temporarily obscured this fundamental truth. The relationship that emerges from this new foundation is qualitatively different. There's space for both people to be authentic. There's respect for mutual autonomy. There's trust that doesn't need to be constantly tested. There's love that doesn't need to be proven every moment. More importantly, there's the peace that comes from knowing your happiness isn't in another person's hands. You can deeply appreciate the other's presence without panicking at their absence. You can rejoice in the love you receive without defining your worth by it. This isn't an easy journey, but it's a journey worth every tear, every moment of uncertainty, every courageous step toward your own truth. Because on the other side of emotional dependency waits not just healthier relationships, but a more authentic, freer, more genuinely yours life. The transformation Jung proposed isn't easy, but it's the most rewarding one there is. And if you want to deepen this understanding even further and begin your own path to liberation, I've prepared something special for you. In the first pinned comment, you'll find our ebook, 21 Days of Transformation with Carl Jung. A practical guide that will accompany you step by step on this journey of meeting your own essence. These are exercises, reflections, and practices based on Jung's teachings that you can apply in your daily life to start transforming your relationship with any type of dependency. The invitation is made. The door to your emotional prison was always unlocked. The only question that remains is, are you ready to walk out? If this content touched something in you, if you recognized yourself in these words and felt there's something that needs to change, write in the comments, I choose freedom. Let this be recorded as a commitment to yourself, as the first step of this transformative journey. Remember, emotional dependency isn't a life sentence. It's just a pattern, and patterns can be changed. You have within yourself everything you need to be free. Now it's time to use that strength. See you in the next video, where we'll continue exploring the mysteries of the human psyche and the paths to a more conscious and fulfilling life. Until then, be gentle with yourself. The path to emotional freedom begins with an act of self-love.